Oh, yeah, that's my jam right down there. Countdown jam.
That was a jam.
You like that?
I did.
I love that. I love that.
Bow, 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 bow.
Gets you pumped.
Gets you ready to go. And we're ready to go right now. Welcome, everybody. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, my name is John. I am the host of Pint of Comics. And we've done this before with these guys. We've talked about pro wrestling. The last episode, I was lucky enough to have these gentlemen on with me. We talked about their top 5 favorite wrestlers in the WWF, not the World Wildlife Fund, the World Wrestling Federation of the 1980s. Well, they all said, hey, we got to do a 90s one. And I said, well, we're going to open it up a bunch. We're going to open the parameters up. We're going to play a little bit more. So it's their top 5 favorite wrestlers that were active in the 1990s now. Okay, we're in 90s. And it's from any promotion. So from WWF/E to WCW to something that Sal saw in a VFW on some night in 1994 where he accidentally got hit in the head with a chair. We're going to talk about all that stuff. But first, before we get into that, I've got to introduce my rogues gallery of WrestleManiacs over here. So let's see here. Let's start off with down on the bottom there. We're going to go over to, let's see if I can find it. We just said him. It's Sal from Robber Barons, Inc. Sal, what's going on, man?
Not much. Excited to piss you off with some obscure wrestlers. Not really.
Sal recorded a couple episodes of The Pint with myself and Shauni Mack over there. We'll talk about him in a second last week, and very excited to get to those. But Sal is the part of the Robber Barons, Inc. guys. They sell some incredible pop culture T-shirts, hoodies, bandanas, cooking aprons, all good stuff. Go to www.robberbaronsinc with a K, and you can check them out. Now, I just mentioned a second ago our buddy from HorrorNewsNetwork.net, Shauni Mack. Sean, what's going on, man?
Hey,
how you doing,
guys? Thanks for having me back.
Oh, always. I love rolling the red carpet out for you guys. Sean was also on the same 2 episodes we did where we talked about a couple of movies. We'll hold those until they come out, but it was a lot of fun. We got to talk about a couple of interesting films, and go check out Sean's writings and his musings at HorrorNewsNetwork.net. Up over Sean's head there, you see him. He's one of the 6-packers from Pint of Comics. We got Lou Federico. Lou, what's going on, man?
Nothing. I'm just winding my way through life.
Winding your way through life?
That is it. Day by day.
You've already said that your list somehow is going to piss me off?
No, I said I completely ignored you.
You ignored me. Okay. Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah. I mean,
fair.
I went my own way.
All right. That's fair. You know what? On this one here, you guys started, we set up 10 minutes before we started, and you guys just started like a bunch of fucking crazed dogs already like, oh, this guy that, and this guy that, and I'm already lost. So I'll make it clear again. On the last episode, I didn't have a list, but I could have had a list on the last episode. On this episode, I am just your friendly moderator. I'll throw a couple jokes in here and there, but I know nothing about wrestling in the 90s. We've talked about it before on the show and on last time's show, I think. My official kind of end time for being a fan of wrestling, the last big thing that I ever saw was the WrestleMania where Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior fought. And I think that was in 1990. So literally the beginning of the decade, I was out. So I always kept tabs on stuff. I know names, but I couldn't put a face to half the names. All right. So up on the other side there next to me, you know him from Pittsburgh. He doesn't know what corned beef is. He's your favorite Pittsburghian. SWOproductions.com. It's Stu. Stu, what's going on?
I am still trying to figure out my list. I have a bunch of names. I don't know who the top 5 are, so I'm just working on it. I've got the Lloyd where I'm going to have 13 honorable mentions, so you just got to bear with me.
Okay.
The 90s was a hard era.
Yeah.
When you gave me the 80s, 5 wrestlers that are my favorite, easy. If you gave me the 2000s or the 2010s, there would be a lot of people I like, but it would literally just be measuring out favorites. For the 90s felt like 4 different eras of wrestling, just kind of all mashed together, and I'm not sure who to include for what purposes.
All right, well, I'll have you go last. All right, I'll have you last. Lou is already putting a timeout in. Lou, timeout. Go ahead.
Can we talk about this corned beef thing for a minute?
Oh, you don't know about the corned beef?
No, I don't. This is blowing my mind.
So last year, as everybody who pays attention to the Penny Comics on Facebook knows, Scary Larry Dwyer, Stu, and myself went through all of the Friday the 13th films. And this Tuesday, we'll be finishing all that off. Yeah, there you go, Crystal Lake shirt. Talking about 2 of the fan films. But one of the episodes, somehow corned beef came up.
Yeah.
And Stu literally part 8. And Stu literally has never had a corned beef sandwich.
Well, to that point, I hadn't.
To that point, but you're like 40 years old. So, I mean, that's still pretty sad. And we kind of had to explain to him the difference between corned beef and pastrami. So, yeah.
And then on part 9, I ate pastrami and corned beef on camera.
On camera, he went to the deli. That was a good. Lou, if I could find that episode and get you the minutes for that, I suggest you watch it. It's a chaotic, crazy couple minutes there. I mean,
like no St. Patrick's Day in 40 years. Have you ever had corned beef?
No, who eats that? It's weird.
Yeah, I do. Well, I did.
It took me forever to find any. Because I was like, I'll eat some for the next time we record, whenever we did part 9. And literally, I think like 20 minutes before we recorded, I found some.
I was going to say, literally go to any grocery store in March and they have corned beef.
Well, it wasn't March.
It's the other insane thing is Stu is from Pittsburgh, which you only picture people in Pittsburgh eating meat by the hand.
They don't even worry about bread. They just
What are you eating, Charlie? I got meat.
Aren't they famous for like a huge burger named after Roethlisberger that's like 78 patties and bacon and eggs and
I haven't heard of that in a long time.
Like the Roethlisberger.
Probably. I haven't heard of that in a long time, like since his first couple years, but yeah.
All right. So before we get into this, let's just go over a couple of these comments here. John Marini, who I did a podcast with last week with my buddies, the Insufferable Bastards. Tomorrow night at the Strand Theater, where Larry normally shows his shows, John is putting on a double feature of the 1987 the 1987 Masters of the Universe film and the 1990 TMNT film. Don't tell Lloyd; he'll get mad because he doesn't like that movie.
He hates that movie.
$12. It's a bunch of great trailers, a bunch of giveaways, very cool stuff. So if you're in the Connecticut area and you're like, tomorrow night, I got nothing to do, head over to Seymour and go check that out. But he put down Mantar. So I don't know who that is, but you guys laughed a little bit. Chris, our buddy Chris, who's always here, he put down Dr. Isaac Yankim.
Ooh.
Isaac Yankim.
I saw a pay-per-view in the 90s that Dr. Isaac Yankim was on.
That's all you have to say about that.
He was only on like 2. I figured that kind of gives it away. I saw SummerSlam 1995. It's a terrible show, but it had a Shawn Michaels Razor Ramon ladder match.
Dr. Isaac Yankim, D.
Yeah. Eric said you have to put some respect on that man's credentials. Thank you.
But can we agree that his best gimmick was, of course, Fake Diesel?
Yes.
Okay.
Wasn't he a Christmas monster at some point?
He was down in Smoky Mountain.
Yeah.
Yep.
Christmas monster. That's a great gimmick.
I am so confused.
What a horrible idea Fake Diesel and Razor were.
Isaac Yankim equals Kane for those who don't know. Yeah. Is that Kane? Is that the Undertaker's brother?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I love, that's one of my favorite things about wrestling is how they just recycle people and their gimmicks. Because even when I was watching, I remember very clearly Tito Santana was in the WWF for like 15 years. And then all of a sudden he was El Matador. And like they acted like you weren't supposed to know it was the same guy, like just like wearing a Matador's costume. But I knew. I figured it out. All right. You know what? We're going to go to Stu last because Stu has still working on his list. So I'm going to start with six-packer with Lou. We're going to start with Lou and go down that way. So Lou, Who is your number? Now again, Pine and Comics rules. I want your number 1 to be your true number 1. If you want to put them all in an order of your favorites, that is fine. But if your 2 through 5 are just kind of willy-nilly, that's fine. But I want 1 to be 1. So Lou, who's your number 5?
Okay, well, we're going to start with Hall and Nash. And I think I tried to pick people that crossed over, you know what I mean? Because like it's so easy just to get 5 from WWF at the time, or WCW, or even ECW. I kind of wanted to branch out, and I figured since Hall and Nash went from WWF to WCW, it kind of worked. And I'm picking them as a pair because, well, they went as the outsiders, so it counts as your tag team. There was a point where Razor was probably one of the biggest stars in the WWF. His ladder match with Shawn at WrestleMania 10 set the stage for every ladder match to follow it. He won multiple Intercontinental titles. Nash was the WWF champion. He debuted as Shawn's heavy, his bodyguard. Then 1996, after the curtain call in Madison Square Garden, where, for those of you who don't know, they basically, well, in a wrestling term, broke kayfabe and let everyone know that, you know, that wrestling, well, everyone kind of knew wrestling was fake, but predetermined. But the whole curtain call at Madison Square Garden set the stage for them to go over to WCW, which then led to the NWO, and then led to WCW actually beating WWF for 83 weeks in the ratings on Monday night. They're two of the most important people of the 90s, in my opinion, in the wrestling business.
So is Nash the guy that I met at that con?
Yes, Kevin Nash is the guy you met at the con in Rhode Island.
I've told that story before, man. That guy was a giant man.
He's huge.
Yeah. He shook my hand, and I said it before, so if it's repetitive, I'm sorry, but he shook my hand and his fingers were like touching my elbow, it felt like.
And one of the nicest guys too. He's so nice. Yeah.
He was super nice. I was waiting for Lou outside of the bathroom, and he comes out of the bathroom.
For those of you who don't know, John meets everybody at a Comic-Con in the bathroom.
Well, no, when you're in the bathroom. Yeah, when you're in the bathroom.
What was it? John Barrowman, Neil Adams, Kevin Nash,
Jerry Lawler. Oh no, we met Jerry Lawler.
We were ordering hot dogs behind Jerry Lawler.
Yeah. So yeah, he came over, shook my hand, and he was just a super nice guy. I think he thought maybe I was a fan by the way I was looking at him, and I was not looking at him as a fan. I was looking at him as, holy shit, you're a giant person. You were so big.
That was also before he had his knee surgeries and all that, so he was walking pretty gingerly. He
said to me, and I've said it before, but he shook my hand and he said, "How you doing, brother?" And I was like, because all wrestlers say brother, and I said, "Good, man. How are you?" And I said to him, I said, "Man, there's no way I could take you." And he pulls me in close and he goes, "You could take me easy, man. My knees are shit." And then he said, "Have a good show," and he walked away. But my Lord. He was a big dude.
And then he said, "Hold on, I have to go film Magic Mike."
Yeah. Punisher with Tom Jane, right? That was a couple years before that, I think.
And like a weird 2-second part in John Wick.
Is he in John Wick?
Yeah, he's like the big club scene they have in John Wick. He's the bodyguard outside the club that John Wick walks up to and is like, "Hey, I'm going in there," and he's like, "Okay."
Oh, okay. I thought you were really.
He was also in, I think, the second Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? Wasn't he?
Oh, he was Super Shredder, yeah.
Super Shredder, yeah.
Oh, yeah, right.
Oh, that's going way back.
I like how Funk from Robert Baron Sink just put me into I look like every other wrestling fan.
It is true, John. You do.
Do I? All right. I was going for NASCAR fan.
You fit the key demo real well.
I was going, beat him good, Hulk, beat him good. All right. All right. So, and Lou goes first, and Lou immediately pulls the Shauni Mack card from last time, because Shauni Mack pulled the tag team card, which I had not said was okay, but because I love him, it was okay. But this time, I said it was okay. So, Sean, who is your number 5 on the list?
So, ironically, no tag teams. Spoiler, no tag teams are on my list. I just wanted to stir the pot a little bit. So I got to say, this was way harder. That, like Stewie mentioned before, like this was way harder to come up with a list like 5 for the 90s, because the 90s was such a crazy eclectic decade. You start out with like the end of the golden era, then you have the new generation right into the attitude era, and you got everything going on at WCW. It was crazy, and all these other promotions popping up, and it really was probably the best decade for wrestling as pro wrestling fans. So I'm going to start my list off in an extreme way. My number 5 is the most homicidal, suicidal, genocidal, death-defying son of a bitch, Sabu.
He was on my list until about 1 o'clock this afternoon.
Yeah, he's bounced on and off mine, but I got to leave him on there. I mean, so ECW, I was a huge fan of ECW. They used to show it at midnights on Saturdays on MSG Network. He kind of defined that promotion to me, that renegade outlaw, mud show outlaw bullshit, like Jim Cornette would say. You had Dreamer, you had, Sandman, you had Raven, you had these other guys, you had Mikey Whipwreck. They all played their part.
Mikey Whipwreck?
Yeah, we won't even get into Mikey Whipwreck right now, John. Right. Another time I'll explain them to you.
All right, thank you.
And you had the Public Enemy, who were one of my favorite tag teams. But Sabu never said a word. The dude just killed himself in every match. Barbed wire, putting himself through tables, multiple tables. Even when he wins, he's taking the brunt of the damage against whoever he's facing. The dives into the crowd. The guy really did revolutionize a lot of that stuff. I got to give it up to Sabu. ECW, again, one of my favorite promotions. He was ECW to me. And when he left to go to WCW, the beginning of the Nitro era, I was kind of pissed, but what do you know? He's right back a couple months later.
Yeah,
after
it felt like
stopped,
he was there for no time at all.
Once Bischoff's like, stop diving into their crowd, he's like, no, fuck that, I'm out of here. And he went back to ECW and then feuded with Taz, which was one of the best feuds in the 90s for any promotion, Sabu and Taz.
All right, so Sabu, someone I don't know. I got to be honest, when you started off with homicidal, suicidal, I thought you were talking about Chris Benoit, and I'm like, I'm like, wow, Sean's really leaning into that.
Yeah, I'm going blue on this one.
Sean's really leaning into that family murder angle on this guy. All right.
Are we allowed to say his name yet? Or do we not?
I just did. I just did.
Get it out of the way.
Get it out of the way. Yeah. Well, honestly, do you guys? We'll keep the death to a minimum this time, but that's a good part of conversation. Does what he did, which is fucking awful. I made a joke. It's fucking awful. I'm not a monster. Does what he did make him unavailable for a list like this? I don't know if it does because like okay, OJ Simpson.
Yeah. For me,
does it really? Does it? Okay, it does. All right. Mm-hmm. I'm one of those guys. I don't always know. Like they're not pulling OJ Simpson. I know he was not. And
WWE and Vince jumping to the memorial episode literally the day after before they knew everything just made it worse.
So I guess favorite, I totally understand, but in the long run, do you think he's still able to make a best of list?
Oh,
that's tough.
It is. It is.
All right.
I will say the biggest problem I have with Benoit is top 5 Royal Rumbles ever is one of them is definitely 2004, the one that he won. So and I love the Royal Rumble. I have an entire article series where I break down all the Rumbles. It's hard to talk about the Rumbles and the all-time best Rumbles because one of them is like, oh yeah, the one he won.
All right. I'm honestly not trying to be funny. I get the idea this is favorite, so I can see where it's that's out the window, but just based on skill. Because even I remember him from towards the end of my time, and he was considered one of those guys. And apparently Lou already included a murder.
That's whoops. It's tough.
There's a lot of scummy and bad wrestling stuff that you can kind of overlook because the overall legacy kind of at least overshines it with the exception of a few people.
What do you say about Snuka?
Yeah, exactly. But there's a couple guys like Snuka, like Benoit, that it's hard to even you can't put it out of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's fair. I'm going to go with Ken from the incredible ODPH podcast, the Ultra Duro Parlay Hour, and say the crime wipes anything wrestling away. We'll leave it at that, and we'll try to stay away from as much death this time as we did last time. I do want you guys, though, because I don't know.
Shit, the first guy on my list is dead.
Well, I'm not even being funny, but just for me, almost as a statistical thing, if you do mention a guy that has passed, let me know. Because I just the 80s, it was half of the list were that. So, all right, Sal, what do you got?
Since we're on downer, I guess I'll have a different kind of downer on my list. I'm going to go with Owen Hart, and just to preface my list too, I tried to avoid anyone who was on my list last time from the 80s because there were a couple guys who kind of crossed over, Bret Hart, Rick Rude, which may come up for other people. But like for me, I tried to avoid that. But Owen Hart, it was a guy who really like Bret kind of was Owen in the 90s and eventually, came back with Bret and everything. But he had such a good run of from being a heel to a face and a lot of potential. Unfortunately, ended poorly. He died in a horrible accident and all. But he was always like kind of like classic heel, great matches with Bret, and he just had a lot of good solid matches. And I also, like Lou, I'm trying to have a balanced list. I'm not going all in one direction, and so he's my number 5.
Bret versus Owen at, I'm assuming, WrestleMania 10 Classic.
Yes.
Probably the best opening match in WrestleMania history. That was
Owen and
incredible.
Coco, high energy.
Yeah, or Owen and Yokozuna, another great tag team.
Owen and Neidhart, the new federation or the new foundation.
Yeah, and
The
British Bulldog.
I would say the brilliant thing about WrestleMania 10 that people have to remember is that when Owen beat Bret in that opening match, and then Bret went on to beat Yokozuna later on for the title, the final shot of WrestleMania 10, and I just watched it the other day just because I wanted to, was Owen standing in the aisle, like watching everyone celebrating with Bret and just giving him that look of, you son of a, you know what I mean? And it's just like it building that entire brother versus brother feud. WrestleMania 10 did an amazing job of just like jump starting that whole thing and just bringing it to another level.
All right. So that's okay. Interesting. And he passed. It was that he was the one with the accident in the rafters, right?
Yeah.
I do remember that. Okay. Stu, you've had like 15 minutes or 22 minutes now. Number 5.
So the thing about the 90s for me is it was a great time to be a wrestling fan because I didn't care about work rate. Like I just didn't care about it in the 90s. I cared about whether I was entertained or not. So I'm going to number 5 to when I started watching wrestling, 92, 93. One of the first guys that really caught my eye and I was a fan of, and he went through a few gimmick changes in the 90s and I didn't care. I followed him the entire way because his finishing move was grabbing your head and squeezing it. Crush
Shaka,
from
bro.
WWF in the 90s. I loved him so much. I just started watching wrestling in the early 90s. He's got this orange and purple and yellow. He looks like neon fruit punch. And he's out there and he's like, I'm Hawaiian Shaka. And it's like, all right, cool, whatever. Go squeeze that guy's head. And he's like, I'm going to squeeze that guy's head. It's such a good move. How do more people not just squeeze somebody's head? And he was just this massive dude. Like he looked like he should have been the next Hogan. Vince eventually like spun around and made Luger the next Hogan. Crush should have been the next Hogan. And he shouldn't have been because Crush like real early into his singles career got pinched for like having a bunch of drugs and guns or something and went to jail for a while. I didn't care. He was Crush. He was awesome. Then he came back and his gimmick was like, I'm Crush and I went to jail and now I have dreadlocks.
So John Marini says vicious turn on Macho Man, and I think Vince here is saying Crush versus Macho at Mania was dope.
That was also at Mania 10.
Crush squeezed the head of Demolition until that team burst. All right, so that's our first round. Let me read off. We got our buddy here, John from Shocking Things Podcast. Now, okay, because maybe Gold Dust is his number 5. The natural Dustin Rhodes morphed into the androgynous Gold Dust with black and gold makeup when he entered the WWF in 1995. The Hollywood Backlot Brawl match in WrestleMania 12 that featured Gold Dust versus Roddy Piper proved Gold Dust wasn't just a gimmick at all. Now, John's not here, so we could talk shit if you want. Do you guys? Is that someone that you would put anywhere in the strata, or do you guys think,
Gold Dust was honestly close to was damn close for me.
Yeah, he was a shitty wrestler. Like, I never want to sit and watch a Gold Dust match, but he was so entertaining outside. Like, all his promos, all his vignettes, whatever. He was so invested in the character and really just bought everything he did. And we all, as wrestling fans, at some point have gone, Gold Dust.
He actually asked Vince. He said, I think it was like 50,000. He said,
no, it was like $1 million.
Was it that much?
A ton of money.
It was a lot of money, and he would have had breast implants put in for the character.
Was the character like? So he said androgynous. So it was like, okay, all right. Yeah. When I was a kid, Hillbilly Jim was a wrestler. So I don't know. I don't know about these guys.
Although I think having Marlena by his side too kind of helped him really get into the character, because it's like, all right, maybe he's not, or maybe he is. I don't know. Like, the dude was a good wrestler, and a professional. He's still doing it today. So that goes to show, how much of a pro the dude was or is,
and definitely unique.
And he would go on to do a gimmick where he got electrified and then developed a stutter for the rest of his career as Goldust. I never understood why.
Well, there was still a lot of homophobia in the 90s. So, I mean, it played right into that, and people hated him.
That didn't happen until the 2000s. That was when he was teaming with Booker T.
Well, look, Stu.
See, this is the problem with the 90s. You're right.
So, Stu, the whole thing about the electrocution and the stutter, I understand more when a few years ago, when John and I did our old podcast with Vinny from the Hip, we were over recording one day, and Vinny showed me a video of like a octogenarian woman giving birth to a giant hand. So that's the kind of shit that happened in wrestling at that time. So I guess it's not that weird. I guess it's not that weird.
It's funny because he actually preceded that. He was more like New Generation than into the Attitude Era, and his character fit the Attitude Era, obviously. But he started before that. He came out, what was it, like 95 he debuted.
Yeah.
So they weren't even trying to get edgy then. And yeah, he had a big program with Ahmed Johnson, if you guys remember that, where he gave him mouth-to-mouth in the back.
Yeah.
And the crowd was very on Ahmed's side on that one. He had the gold stuff around his lips when he woke up.
He just made people uncomfortable, and it worked.
Yeah, and his feud with Roddy Piper in the back lot, was like everyone knows that match. That was at the time was like a huge thing.
All right, let's move on to our number 4s. Let's go back to Lou. Lou, who do you got at number 4?
I am gonna go with Jeff Hardy. And I'm specifically picking Jeff Hardy, not his way less talented brother, Matt. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, don't even. Tying into what Sean said, ECW was huge in the underground in the 90s, and it was making waves, and it was starting to get really, really, really popular. And it had its hardcore base of fans. And Jeff kind of, I don't want to say homogenized it, but he brought that style to the mainstream, to a larger audience than ECW was reaching. He had the look, he had the attitude. I mean, kids back then were dressing like him. You'd see him all in the crowd with the arm things on, and everyone wanted to see him go through 7 tables and a ladder. And he brought a high-flying, hardcore style to WWF and influenced a whole generation of wrestlers. And it says a lot that even now at 45, I think he's still going. And he's been able to keep what made him popular, but also include the wisdom of age and help younger wrestlers along, not only in the ring, but also teaching them not to make the same mistakes he did, because he's had tons of mistakes.
Okay, so to go along with what Lou just said, I've heard of these people before, Jeff and Matt Hardy. I know they're brothers. I know that's the whole thing. But he seemed to have gone with the unpopular opinion. So I'm going to go around real quick. Easy answer. Sean, Jeff or Matt Hardy?
Oh, Jeff.
Stu?
Oh, I never liked Jeff. Jeff has like the personality of toast. He's a better wrestler than Matt, 100%, but Matt's more entertaining.
Sal?
Matt.
Okay. All right. And anybody out there, if you want to throw up Jeff or Matt, let us know in the comments. Shauni Mack, you should watch the original Broken Matt Hardy.
You should watch the original Broken Matt Hardy stuff, yes.
What is Broken Matt Hardy?
He did a gimmick in TNA where he went crazy, and they just did these weird theatrical matches, and Matt Hardy developed this unnatural accent that does not exist in nature anywhere.
Oh, hello, I'm Matt Hardy.
And he had a drone. He had drone 1 that flew around and talked to people and made a hologram of Matt that talked to them. And
wait.
Yeah, no, don't even, John. It's like
okay,
it's very theatrical.
All right, okay.
Yeah, it's terrible.
They had dilapidated boats. They had a lake on his property that if you got thrown into the lake, you pop back out as an old version of your gimmick.
What? Like what?
Yeah.
This sounds like a science fiction show and/or a comic book.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
But it was it was so over the top.
Yeah.
For wrestling, like, you know, not that long ago, to be so over the top and doing, like, you know, with people now being focused on work rate and everything and more realism, he just went the complete opposite direction and totally embraced it in a like satirical way, I would say, and it blew up.
All right, I'm gonna real quick. I have a question about something you guys have mentioned multiple times. So Vince says broken Matt all damn day over Jeff. Jeremy Courtney says Jeff was way cooler to look at, but Matt was a better talker. Eric says Matt Hardy's wife greater than Jeff Hardy's wrestling.
Rebby, I'm constantly pregnant. Hardy.
Ken says the Hardy compound is cinematic gold. Okay, thank you all. What is work rate? Sean, what's work rate? Does anybody know work rate? Someone tell me what work rate is.
Work rate is
Go ahead, Sean.
How you perform in the ring, basically. It's
your batting average for wins and losses.
Yeah, I guess you could say. I guess you could say that. You guys have a better definition of it?
It's how entertaining you are in the ring. Like I said, Crush is not a work rate guy. Crush is not somebody I want to sit down and be like, man, I want to watch Crush go for 20 minutes in the ring.
Okay,
I don't fucking do that.
Here's the way to get it to John. John, okay, you know Bret Hart, right?
Oh, yeah.
You've watched Bret Hart matches?
Yeah.
You've watched Hulk Hogan matches, right?
Yeah.
Bret Hart has work rate. Hulk Hogan doesn't.
Right.
Okay, guys who are putting an effort into the wrestling, like there's a concern with like their actual wrestling ability as well as character and all that.
Their ability to perform in the ring, to work a match that makes sense, their ability to have everything mean something. Like for instance, I just said Bret Hart. Bret, when he was in a match, was able to guide anyone he was in the ring with to the best match they've ever had. Everything he did made sense. His finishing move was the sharpshooter, so everything he did targeted the lower body. You know what I mean? And it all flowed together. Whereas Hogan was come out, throw a couple punches, someone put him in a headlock and he goes down and then he hulks up and then, someone will punch him from behind and then they'll rake a back and then he'll come in, he'll punch some more times, drop a leg and it's over. You know what I mean? It's really like the easiest way for you to understand it is Bret Hart versus Hulk Hogan.
All right, I actually understand what Jeremy says here too. Like you just said, Rey Mysterio versus Big John Studd. I get that.
Yeah,
Big John Studd is like a lumbering oaf, and Rey Mysterio is like doing flips and yeah. Okay, all right, Sean, who's your number 4?
So Sal kind of touched upon him with his number 5. It's Owen Hart. I had to go with somebody from the Hart family. Bret, I was just because the Hart Foundation, I hated him. I was a British Bulldogs guy in the 80s. So it kind of carried over to Bret's singles career. I mean, he's definitely one of the best wrestlers of the night, one of the best of all time, singles guys for sure. Champion, I don't know, but wrestler, sure. But Owen, there was something about Owen. I was pulled back into wrestling for that WrestleMania 10 match. I hadn't watched wrestling probably like you, John, since WrestleMania 6. That was probably the last pay-per-view I saw. Was pulled back in for WrestleMania 10, the opening match, Bret and Owen. Didn't even know the backstory really, except that they were brothers. And one of the greatest matches. Definitely one of the greatest WrestleMania matches I've seen. And just the picture of Owen when he comes out on top and he beats his bigger brother with the spittle on the side of his face. That that image that just will never go away. And then at the end of the pay-per-view, when everyone holding Bret on their shoulders, the title, and there's Owen on the ramp looking on. That started such a great program for Owen, where he's chasing Bret. He goes and he wins King of the Ring that year, and he becomes the King of Hearts. He starts bringing other family members. Jim Neidhart comes back. Bulldog comes back for SummerSlam. He starts pulling other family members in, and that program, Bret and Owen, was one of the greatest programs for sure of the 90s and maybe of all time. And my only regret and the only thing that pissed me off is Owen should have had a run with the title. I feel he should have give the kid give the kid one win. Don't give it to him at SummerSlam or but give it to him at Survivor Series. I don't know. Actually, they gave it to Backlund instead, which blows my mind. But you'll give the kid a run with the title, and he was always there. He was in Cornette's stable. He was teaming with Yoko. He's teaming with Bulldog. Just absolutely one of the best workers. Work rate was off the charts with Owen. The Black Heart, Owen Hart later on after the Montreal screw job. So many great things with him, and unfortunately, they saddled him into the Attitude Era. They saddled him with his old gimmick from when he first started, with the blue blazer. I'm positive that they were eventually going to transition him back into regular Owen Hart and give him some kind of run. But over the edge, 98, unfortunately, or 99, he has that accident, and we'll never know. But absolutely, it's very underappreciated and a very appreciated wrestler at the same time. King of Hearts, Owen Hart.
Yeah, and he was one of those guys, like, he was always getting so close to maybe being in the main event picture, and either something happens and he can't, or there was the drama with Bret and everything, or there was a lot of drama with HBK and those guys, and it's a shame because he was always so close, and you're like, okay, this is gonna be it, and then something happens, and it gets pulled back, and it's just such a shame.
It's going to be it, and then they put him in the Nation of Domination.
Yeah,
that's right.
And they make him wear, a road warning sign. I mean, just craziness.
Owen was supposed to get the game gimmick that Trips got. That sentence means nothing to me, but I'm assuming you guys understand that. All right, Sal, who's your number 4, numero cuatro?
Well, this was a tough choice because there were a lot of guys in ECW who I was like huge fans of. One of them, Sean already mentioned, was Sabu, but I feel like he was more a guy who he just was known for his crazy matches. But there was a guy who in ECW was kind of known as almost like it became an unstoppable force, and that was Taz when he was in ECW. He was the booking of him, his wrestling ability, all that. So he came back. He was a monster, even though he was like basically a small guy in comparison to other guys.
Yeah, he was 5'6". He's a tiny dude.
And he's wrestling, Bam Bam Bigelow, and he's wrestling Mike Awesome, but he just had so many great matches where he was booked as a guy who was not going to lose.
Did you say Mike Awesome?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, he just and he always had such a vast array of moves, all kinds of different suplexes, and he was kind of like nowadays the MMA crossover, like guys who are doing MMA stuff, it's like the cool thing. He was doing this in the 90s. Mm-hmm. He was basically like they sort of like patterned MMA type fighter with him, and he doing these submission moves like arm bars and e-bars and everything that now you see everyone doing, but at the time it was completely innovative. He's really guy him as almost like an unstoppable guy.
All right, I've heard the name. I don't know who it is. Stu, your list is coming along wonderfully now that we've been on for 38 minutes. Who do you have for number 4?
I'm going to actually stick with ECW myself, and I'm going to go with the guy who for much of ECW's run was essentially the boss level of ECW, the big, insufferable asshole of ECW that everybody wanted to see beat, and he almost never lost, was Shane Douglas, the franchise. He always had a gang around him. He had the triple threat. And it was him and 2 other guys. Most famously, it was Candido and Bigelow, but for a while it was Candido and Brian Lee. He just had this gang around him, and he had Francine running interference for him all the time. And he's another one of those guys. He was decent at work rate. Like, he could put on good matches, but I mean, he was such an asshole, and he was so good at it. Like, he was just smarmy, and he looked good, and you just wanted to see this guy get his ass beat all the time. And it's funny because I live in Pittsburgh. Shane Douglas is from Pittsburgh. Every time he came here to wrestle, he was a babyface. Like, people in Pittsburgh always cheered Shane. Everyone else booed the fuck out of him everywhere, but everybody in Pittsburgh loved him. And I mean, he was just so entertaining in that role. And he put so many people, like, he got Al Snow so over in ECW before Al went off to WWE. He got RVD over. He got Taz over and made them look so great when they feuded with him over the TV title or the world title.
Eric sends me a message here saying, watch ECW One Night Stand. It is possibly the best wrestling card for non-wrestling fans ever. Do you guys know that? Do you agree with that? Or
Sure.
Yeah. Sandman's entrance in One Night Stand was freaking awesome.
It's like the greatest hits of ECW after ECW. So it is good for like someone who's not familiar, where it's a little more niche if you were just pick a ECW event. It kind of covers the gamut. But on Shane Douglas, what I was going to say is, unfortunately with him, he was like injured a lot. He was definitely, luckily for him, he was so good at promos that he basically made a career of promos in between all his injuries. But match wise, because of that, he was to have as many, I think, good matches as he probably could have.
Yeah, Shane also started the whole extreme movement. Technically, he won the Eastern Championship Wrestling belt and immediately threw it down and said, "We denounce the NWA. We are now Extreme Championship Wrestling, no longer Eastern Championship Wrestling." And that's Paulie was off and running there. But Shane started that.
And one of the best, like, Shane Douglas, man, you just want to hate him. At the beginning of his main event run, he was feuding with the Pitbulls. And Pitbull number 1, yes, the Pitbull tag team were literally called Pitbull number 1 and Pitbull number 2. Pitbull number 1 had a broken neck, and he had like one of those halo things. It wasn't like he came out with like one of those stupid little foam neck things. He had a halo thing, and at one match, like, Shane just grabbed it and started shaking it. And it's like, Jesus, dude, come on, that's terrible. I love you, and I want you to get your ass beat for that.
The only time Joey Styles was speechless.
Yeah.
He just gasped.
all right, let's round off the number 4. Oh, this is actually kind of funny. John from Shocking Things, check them out. Shocking Things podcast. They're doing Ninja November this month. They just did Enter the Ninja and Revenge of the Ninja, and I think Ninja 3, The Domination, came out today. Mike Awesome, which you just said. Awesome was 6'6" and 300 pounds, yet he moved like a cruiserweight. He had a great career in Japan and ECW in the 90s. His matches with Masato Tanaka put him in the number 4 spot. Unfortunately, WCW turned him into a joke when he entered the company in the year 2000 with gimmicks like that 70s guy, and here's the best wrestling name ever, if this is true.
Yep, it is.
The Fat Chick Thriller.
Yeah.
Thankfully, this is just a 90s list. The Fat Chick Thriller. Okay.
Yeah, only WCW could take a guy who is known for just having like brutal matches, as he mentioned with Tanaka. Like, they're just matches where they're throwing each other through a table multiple times, like super stiff. And then he goes to WCW, and they give him these like wacky 70s gimmick, and it's
the Fat Chick Thriller. Okay, let's move into the number 3s. Let's go back to Luigi Federico and find out who got him to his number 3 in this list.
Number 3 is actually going to come back and burn me into the 2000s because he had amazing matches in the 2000s too, but I think his 90s body of work cements him. I'm going to go with Mick Foley. Mick Foley was everywhere in the 90s. He had matches, like amazing matches with Sting and Vader in WCW. Then he goes to ECW and has that amazing match. What was it? I think I have it on my notes here. Hold on one sec. He has an amazing match with Sabu at Holiday Hell. He ends up in Japan and has one of the greatest death matches of all time with Terry Funk. He comes back to He comes back to the WWF at the time. Comes back as Mankind. Obviously, we don't need to talk about his Hell in the Cell against The Undertaker. He had an amazing match with Michaels in Your House in like 96. I can't think of any one guy. He reinvented himself, multiple characters. You know, he was Mankind, went head-to-head with The Undertaker, obviously. Then, Dude Love was the 90s, where that was like a throwback to a character he had when he was a kid in high school and college, and also coming as Cactus Jack, but that was later, more towards the 2000s. But like I said, it's going to burn me later because his matches with Triple H were incredible, but I can't I can't think of anyone who did it at a high level everywhere in the 90s more than him.
Well, I guess here's what it is. I guess you said that it's going to burn you later, as in like you can't use them on the 2000s list.
Well,
but
I mean, it's like I kept Bret off my 90s list because I used him in the 80s, but I could put Bret on every list known to man.
Well, what I'm saying is if you had to, like, gun to your head, put him on one of the 2 decades lists, would this be the one you'd put him on?
I would say yes.
So that's the right answer.
But I could still put him in the 2000s and it would work.
Did he have? John says he had amnesia at one point. Did he have amnesia?
Yeah, in WCW, Vader power bombed him onto the floor, and he had amnesia. The camera crew was following him around, and he had a life with this other lady that he was living with, and he was like, "No, I'm not Cactus Jack."
You know, I mean, he went through his gimmick in ECW where he refused to be hardcore, got him so much freaking heat. It was a stroke of brilliance. It's like you take a hardcore icon, you put him in the hardcore brand, and in order to generate the most amount of heat, he's wearing suits. He's sitting there like with his dog, like his kids on his legs, like because of the whole Kane Dewey sign at the time, and he just and that was a stroke of brilliance. And he refused to be hardcore, and people hated him for it.
The thing I always found amazing about Mick Foley, and again, not being a 90s wrestling guy, but he's one of those people that pervaded it and became, a big enough name that guys like me knew who he was that Mick Foley, like, retired, like, in the last, like, 15 or 20 years, looked the same as he did when he wrestled. Like, the guy has always looked like a short order cook at best, like, which, like, and I know there's schlubby guys, but, like, you're used to in the 80s, you're in an era where it's like all Paul Orndorffs and Lex Lugers, and, the steroids are flowing like the champagne, and then you got this guy who looks like an 8th grade janitor, So I don't know. I think that's impressive too. That even in this predetermined sport, he can hang in there with guys like the Undertaker and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like, the Hell in the Cell match with the Undertaker probably cemented his legacy, and I don't think there's going off a 30-foot high cell through a table and then getting chokeslammed through the cell on the mat in the same match. He's got a tooth coming out of his lip. They had to stretcher him out. I mean, it was nobody could do what he did, and he, more than probably almost anyone, put their body on the line for the business, and he did it. And like I said, he did it everywhere. He knew that was his thing. He knew that he wasn't going to be able to get over, he was never going to be a body guy. You know what I mean? He was never going to be that. So he had to do what he thought he would do to get over. And that was just throw himself around like a wrecking ball and with reckless abandon.
Yeah, and on top of that too, it wasn't just that too. He cutting amazing promos, like you say.
Yeah.
When he was in ECW doing those, I'm hardcore promos. Like there's certain guys and certain promos that are legendary, and he's had many of them.
Yeah, the Kane Dewey promo was freaking incredible. Yeah. That holds up even to this day.
You wrestling nerds really get me, because you guys all remember promos, like specific, like I remember a couple from when I was a kid. Like and mostly because
you remember some, you remember from when you watched.
Well, but
you
mostly
just gave a shit about it.
No, well, mostly because now they're like,
you're all nerds. You remember things. Oh, I remember back in 1984.
No. I'm talking about like the stuff comes back, like the cream of the crop thing, right? I remember seeing that back then with Macho Man, but I probably would have forgotten about it until it became like viral again. But you guys were like, yeah, that time when they had the promo when Owen Hart was talking shit about Jim Neidhart, it was incredible. I'm like, God damn these guys. I love you guys.
You don't remember every promo ever done, but I mean, like, there's ones that just transcend and just live on and are just moments in time. I mean, like the Kane Dewey promo or the Pipe Bomb or the Hard Times promo, or, I mean, like, you can just keep going. You know what I mean? They're famous. And then they just keep living on. The cream rises to the top, All
right, horrornewsnetwork.net. Check his writing out. Shauni Mack, who's your numero tres?
Okay, so my number 3 is a man that I'm convinced was saddled with a gimmick. This is because he started at a point where the ridiculous occupational and just silly gimmicks were starting up and Vince was just rolling them out. I'm convinced that this gimmick that this man had was not intended to go very long, but damn it, he turned it into a 30-plus year iconic gimmick, and that is The Undertaker. This is a man who was Mean Mark, okay, was kind of being underutilized in WCW, big guy, Vince body type for sure. Let's make him a dead man, and we'll call him The Undertaker, and he won't sell any moves. He'll just go to the ring, and, you know, I swear to God, you watch it's Survivor Series 90, his debut. It is awesome, but you're like, this character isn't going to go that far, right? I mean, obviously, it's a freaking dead guy. They're not going to. Within a year, the guy's got the title from Hulk Hogan before they're like, no, wait, sorry, Hulk. We didn't mean to. Here's it back. Throughout the 90s, he continued to, within the same gimmick, transform himself from the straight dead guy. Then he disappeared and he came back, and then the powers from the urn. Then he changed the gloves and now he's wearing purple and black, and all this stuff. And then by the end of the decade, he's a freaking biker. I mean, and even with all that, the guy was not given the due like he should have throughout that decade. He should have had the title much more than he did, to the point where he actually cut a promo. John, there you go.
Okay, promos.
On Raw. Now, I don't know the date, but it was late in the decade during the Attitude Era, where he's now himself. He's Mark Calloway. He's got a mic and he's in the ring, and he's like, God damn it, I've carried this company on my back for 10 years. Where's my title? And you're like, wow, he's not changing gimmick. No, he's still The Undertaker. The corporate ministry, he goes back to that immediately after. Oh, he's dead guy again. But God damn it, him and Stinger, the only two throughout that whole Monday Night War that never really switched sides. And 31 years later, yeah, we're right. Survivor Series is coming up. So 31 freaking years later, The Undertaker's still one of, if not the most iconic gimmick in pro wrestling history. It's incredible.
And he, again, this is like just some like piece of knowledge that I think I heard. He has the record for WrestleManias in a row, right?
Yeah, the streak. Yeah, which I won't even talk, because to me it's stupid. It's not a streak. It's not like he's unbeaten this whole time. He's unbeaten at WrestleMania. So obviously it's a big deal for him. It's a big deal for the company. They got the streak. They can market that. But to me, it wasn't really a big deal when Lesnar finally ended that. I mean, it wasn't like Nash ending Goldberg's bullshit streak. So.
Oh, Sean doesn't like streaks.
Yeah, I hate streaks.
You would not want to see my underwear after a long work day. All right, Sal.
Oh, God.
Sal, what do we got? What do we got for number 3?
Well, that's kind of good because Sean almost set me up here. But I want to preface one thing where I'm probably one of the few guys who wasn't really an Attitude Era guy. I kind of fell off the WWF at the time at that point, and wrestling in general. But one of the guys who was always huge to me, early 90s and throughout to a point, was Sting, who, like Sean had said, he was a guy who was almost the entire run in the 90s of WCW, when all the NWO and everything was going on. He was the consistently like the good guy who pretty much never turned heel. I mean, while he joined the Wolfpack or whatever in the end, he still was like, he still wasn't a heel. But primarily the earlier Sting, even coming out of the late 80s, but in those early 1990s, Sting basically was the babyface guy in WCW, but he was also having great matches. There's lots of good of those crazy WCW like War Games matches where there's all kinds of cages, Sting Squadron versus the Dangerous Alliance. And it was already mentioned with his match with Cactus Jack and Vader. He just was a guy who was consistently the guy you wanted to cheer for. He was kind of like the Hogan of WCW, but without all the like politics getting him over. It was just because he was almost like the underdog of the company. But
what is the White Castle of Fear besides sounding like the worst ever fast food restaurant?
and then he's this guy, you know, surfer kind of with the buzz cut and everything. But then in the mid 90s, when I don't know exactly when, but he sort of has this turn where he turns into the Crow Sting, which he kind of did for a long time, where he put on black and white face paint and he's up in the rafters, and he basically doesn't even talk for like a year or whatever in the company. He's just showing up and lurking in the rafters, and it completely retransformed himself. I have to say I'm less of a fan of the Crow Sting because he didn't really do that much match wise, and when he did, not all his fault, because NWO was like a complete shit show at some point. He's all involved with Hogan in the title and lots of just crazy, stupid finishes because it is WCW. But for WCW in the 90s, he was definitely one of those guys who really carried the company, even when he was doing that Crow gimmick.
And then he found Jesus and caught heat with everyone because he ratted everyone out when he was apologizing to his wife about like all the women everyone was sleeping with. That was backstage, though. That wasn't real. That wasn't in the ring.
Dirty laundry in the world.
Yeah, he aired out a bunch of other people's dirty laundry and caught a lot of heat with everyone.
Oh boy! All right, SWOproductions.com. Go check it out for some good articles and a awesome bi-weekly podcast. It's Mr. Robert Stewart at number 3. What do you got?
My number 3 is this guy who was really entertaining in the 90s, and hopefully one of the 4 of you can tell me what he's doing nowadays, because I haven't heard from the guy in a long time. I think he was called The Rock. Everybody knows The Rock at this point. He's probably the biggest movie star on the planet. He is in 2010s, 2020s what Tom Cruise was in the 80s. And it's so weird to think that he started in pro wrestling as this dorky guy who just came in, and he was a dork and nobody liked him and everyone chanted about how much they hated him when they were trying to get him over as his babyface. And he just went heel, and all of the personality in the universe just came out of this guy. And I mean, you still see it nowadays. He was just so entertaining. I don't know what else you could really say about The Rock. He came out and he was so entertaining all the time, and he would sing songs, or he would just come up with catchphrases just willy-nilly, like for nothing. Like it was no effort for him to just say something and 2 weeks later it would be on a t-shirt.
That's fair. I will say one thing about what you said there, Stu. Reaches outside of the world of wrestling, but I understand the movie star idea. But man, Tom Cruise made a whole bunch of better movies than The Rock makes. The Rock. Someone's got to. I know he's making money. Who am I to talk about him? But good Lord, please read a script. Have someone point you in the right direction. Because I remember the first movie he did after the Scorpion King, The Rundown. I really loved, and I thought, this guy is going to be like the next Arnold, you know what I mean? And it's been like 15 years of like, from what I've seen, a good movie every like 8 movies. And that might be incidental, you know?
Hey, he's going to be one of your favorite characters soon.
I know Black Adam, right? I love Black Adam, you know, and I have the DC movies. That's a whole nother thing. But you know, when you talk about a movie for like 8 years before it comes out, I don't care anymore. I really don't. I stopped caring. The Shazam movie wasn't good, and they've been talking about this for so long. Yeah, I don't care. All right.
Yeah, so, Rock nowadays is massive compared to wrestling era Rock.
Oh, well, the Rock, the biggest I think I remember having seen him was in that first Fast movie he was in, Fast 5, when he's like in that t-shirt and his arms are just like, and then I see pictures of him when he wrestled. I'm like, he wasn't even that big when he wrestled.
Nope, not even close.
I was going to say, and the best feud of his career is going on right now with Vin Diesel.
Vin Diesel, yeah. their Twitter war.
Yeah.
Vin Diesel's a brave guy because I don't think he could take him at all. All right, so let's go back to John from Shocking Things podcast. Check him out, Shocking Things. And this is going to sound familiar. His number 3, Owen Hart. Owen was always a great wrestler that finally got to shine when he had his rivalry with his brother, Bret Hart, and having the best match at WrestleMania 10. John should just be here. He couldn't make it, but like it's like minds, I guess. All right, let us go to our number 2 and 2 rhymes with Lou. Lou, what's your number 2?
Going with a faction for number 2, and it's going to be DX. And I can't think of any other group that embodied the Attitude Era of the 90s more than them. Born out of the Clique after the curtain call incident that we spoke about earlier when Hall and Nash went over to WCW. Shawn and Triple H teamed up and basically created one of the best stables probably in the history of the business, in my opinion. They had everything. They had presence. They had charisma. Their feud with the Hart Foundation, their feud with the Nation of Domination was awesome, which The Rock was in. I mean, it cemented them. Not to mention, like, the first time Shawn got booted out, and then you bring in the Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, who they turned into household names. Name me a kid of the 90s who didn't get in trouble in school for chopping their crotch and saying "suck it" to somebody. And I can't think of a better group. The invasion of WCW in 1998 was legendary when they showed up with the Jeep and then the tank, right outside the building. I mean, there was nothing that they did that, in my opinion, didn't turn to gold. And
Funk just told you to suck it, Lou.
Come on, Funk, it's true.
All right, so you said faction. How many guys are in this thing?
Well, it started out with Shawn, Triple H, Chyna, Rick Rude was like their lawyer for a bit. Then Shawn lost his smile and went to rehab. And then they brought in X-Pac, who was 1-2-3 Kid, who was one of the most, like, when you talk about go away heat, people freaking hated him. But you know what I mean? He was in there, and people liked him. Then you had Road Dogg and Billy Gunn in there as well, along with Chyna. So it varied from like 3 to 5, and people kind of came and went. And then Road Dogg and Billy Gunn left. But this was into the 2000s when Shawn came back after he found Jesus.
A lot of people finding Jesus in this era.
Sting,
Shawn. Okay. All right.
It's all the alcohol, drugs, and everything else in the 80s
Thing.
and 90s. You end up reading the Bible one day, and you find Jesus.
Rehab.
Jesus.
Lots of rehab. I think Jeff Hardy found Jesus too. If I'm not mistaken.
Rehab.
If that's true, he keeps losing him.
Yeah.
But that was court ordered.
Court ordered
Jesus.
Court-ordered Jesus appointment. All right, Shauni Mack, what do you got for your number 3?
So, my number 3 is a younger guy in the 90s who started out as, he did a bunch in Canada, Japan, Mexico, came to the States and wrestled in ECW in the mid-90s as the Lionheart. Won his first singles title in the U.S. there. Moved on to WCW. Chris Jericho is my number 2. The guy went from, again, a young kid, Lionheart, to Y2J, which was, it sounds silly, but that, Y2J was a hell of a freaking gimmick for this guy. Now he's Fat Elvis over in AEW. But so... that moment when he really was, like, you talk about the Monday Night Wars, it was always guys going from Vince or out of retirement to WCW, and there were very few that were coming over. This is a guy that his contract was coming up. The tide really, really, really turned, especially in the ratings, when he decided, you know what, I can't catch a break here. I'm not big enough. These guys have too much creative control. Bischoff doesn't listen to me. Went to the WWF, and his debut with the Millennium Clock, his debut on that Raw, when the clock ran out and he's at the top of the stage, everyone knew Jericho was going to show up. But the pop from that crowd when you see his name flash on the Jumbotron, and then you see him with his arms out, that that's the biggest pop I've ever heard on television. It was freaking insane. And add the fact that he's now debuting at the top of the ramp with The Rock, at the height of his, pro wrestling career, cutting a promo already in the ring. And now he's cutting a promo on his first night and his first appearance for WWF with The Rock. Absolutely made that guy. That was the point where he became a main eventer to me. He was no longer just a cruiserweight or a guy who complains a lot or had a silly feud with Goldberg where he lost a million times in a row. From that point, this guy can now go with The Rock. He could go with Triple H, Kane, The Undertaker, anybody, you saw him differently. And he's parlayed that into a hell of a career. No matter what I think about him now, he's still out there doing it. But Jericho really, he was a central figure in the Monday Night Wars and a pivotal pro wrestler in the 90s for me. Certainly one of my favorites.
I've seen, I know who he is, obviously, and I've seen quite a few interviews with him on different things, podcasts and stuff like that. And man, he's really Canadian, that guy. Like he has like very Canadian speech patterns, and I can't do it. But my brother-in-law is Canadian from Canada, and when I talk to him, I'm always like less interested in what he's saying and more interested in how he's saying it. All right, so Chris Jericho, Sal, what do you got for 3, buddy?
We're number 2, aren't we?
Oh, are we on 2? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're on 2.
Pardon me, 2.
I was like, oh crap.
I know. I'm like, I gotta come up with another name. My number 2 is a tag team. I think they're most known for their time in WCW, but they've WCW, WWF, ECW, the Steiner brothers, and just for one of the, I'd say next to like a couple other teams, one of which they had matches with, but the Road Warriors, those guys just beat the hell out of each other. Their matches with Dr. Death and Terry Gordy, Vader and Bam Bam. Like these were guys who, even though they didn't have like the scary gimmick because they were just kind of like, college Michigan college dudes, but they were, you knew you were getting in the ring. These guys were going to beat the hell out of each other, no matter who it was. And they really had such a great run of matches in WCW, even going into when they went to WWF, they had some really great matches and some great singles matches in a very brief stint in ECW. And they just, you look at the collection of matches they've had, and it's hard to find too many bad ones until much later on. And on their own, Scott Steiner now, and even in the late 90s, he got really puffed up, and he was still a big guy when the Steiner brothers were big, but he was also super athletic, crazy moves, the Frankensteiner, which now, everyone does that move. But at the time, especially for a pretty big guy, that was just like a move you saw like, oh my God. And a move he hardly ever did in Japan. He had the Steiner screwdriver, I think it was called, which is like probably like one of the most brutal moves you can see in wrestling. They just, the resume kind of speaks for themselves, and just, hard hitting, solid wrestling matches. They weren't crazy promos or anything. They were probably more work rate guys. I mean, Rick Steiner was kind of the crazy one, and he had his whole dog face gremlin shtick or whatever. So they did have personality to go along with it, but just great wrestling matches against a lot of great teams.
Rick Steiner was wrestling when I was watching. He was part of the Varsity Squad. I remember that when he'd wear the singlet and he had the ear headgear on and everything. But he was also one of those dudes. Just like he had no neck. There was no neck there. He was just like, he was all this. I got no neck, but that guy had no neck. Little short, muscular guy. Big mustache too. I always appreciated that about him.
You should see his son. His son's wrestling now.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus.
One
solid muscle.
Braun Breaker.
Braun Breaker. Yeah.
What was Scott Steiner called Was that Big Papa Pump?
Big Papa Pump. The
Yeah.
freak.
That guy
Yeah,
was ridiculous. Yeah, I
And that's
remember
like,
him.
you know, he's like he's a shell of himself, a really large shell of himself. I mean, you want to talk about promos? Like, you look up his math promo in Impact. It became like a whole internet meme.
Yeah, just Google Steiner math.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's
don't even watch
135.3% chance.
Yeah, don't even watch Steiner during the promo. He has like a minion who's dressed up just like him. Just watch him during the promo because he's like,
that's Petey Williams. No minion.
Yeah,
You know what? You know
the finest.
That makes Eric's comment make sense. I didn't put it up because I thought maybe Eric was having a stroke while he was typing, but he put Steiner Brothers would make any top 141 and 2/3 list.
Yeah.
And I was gonna put it up, and I'm like, I don't know even how to go about saying that or what that means. And now it makes sense. So now I don't have to call an ambulance to Eric's house. I feel better now.
he's had a lot of crazy promos, especially after becoming the Big Papa Pump character. But he was a guy who, when they went to WWE, the story is at least that they wanted him to be a singles wrestler, and he basically said no because he didn't want his brother to get stuck, probably either losing a job shortly after or just stuck on the low card. And they just, they knew their tag team was a thing, and he basically looked at it and said, we want to keep doing this. And he always knew he could probably do that down the road. Of course, what he turned into, I think, was a little bit unfortunate, just because he just got so big that he lost a lot of his ability to do.
If I remember correctly,
real wrestling.
If I remember correctly, he kind of looked like Guy Fieri on steroids, right? Like he had that bright blonde hair. Okay.
AKA Billy Graham.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That was okay. I'm sorry. Number 2. We'll go to Stu, the last number 2, or second to last before John. Stu, who do you got for number 2?
I have somebody at number 2 who is going to put all the pressure on Lou to either make him his number 1 or be the only person who didn't include Owen Hart.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
Yeah, I loved Owen in the 90s, and I know the Blue Blazer gimmick is what quote unquote killed him. I know that gimmick, you can't look at that gimmick fondly, but he was doing that Blue Blazer gimmick. And when he passed, he was my favorite thing in wrestling because he was swinging for the fences with that goddamn gimmick. And it was hilarious. They just had this thing going on where he and Jeff Jarrett were tag teaming, and the Blue Blazer would keep running out and saving Jeff Jarrett. And it was one of those things where like everybody knew it was Owen Hart, but they would keep like pretending that they didn't. One point, Owen had a match and the Blue Blazer came out and it was clearly Jeff Jarrett under the mask, and somebody ripped the mask off, and Owen Hart put his cape over Jeff Jarrett's head, walked him back to the ring, or walked him back to backstage, and the entire time is yelling in the camera, "Who was that? Did anyone see who it was?" He's hilarious. He had a gimmick where he won a Slammy for knocking Shawn Michaels out, and then just so he could remain relevant at the Slammy Awards the next year, he just stole one so he could be 2-time Slammy Award winning Owen Hart. He was hilarious, man. Like like they said, he should have been a world title guy. He should have gotten higher up in the card. I think the biggest thing with Owen is that he just didn't care. Like, wrestling was Bret Hart's life. Bret Hart only thinks of himself as like, I'm the greatest wrestler ever. Owen just seemed like, yeah, this is fun. I'll do this. So he was never going to get to Bret's peak, but I don't know. I always liked Owen more. I thought Owen was just so wildly entertaining.
All right, so Lou now has the onus of not like destroying a ghost's memories for everybody. But before that, John from Shocking Things, his number 2, the Great Muta. Muta popularized the moonsault, had a great gimmick, spit green mist in his opponent's face, and always had great matches. That makes me think of when I've talked about this when my parents took me to see Hogan at the Harvard Civic Center when I was like 12. He fought a guy that did that, but it wasn't Muta. Killer Khan. It was Killer Khan. Yeah. All right. So
every Asian wrestler has been given the green spit gimmick.
Yeah.
I think Asuka does it now, right?
Yeah. Well, she was for a while. Yeah.
So someone gets stuck with that one every time.
Yeah.
All right, Lou. You don't have to say Owen Hart, but I think that you would be the outcast. But who do you give your number 1?
Okay, I'm going to preface this by saying Owen Hart went on and off my list more times than anyone else. In the end, though, no, it's not Owen.
Oh,
I know. I was never as much a fan of him as I was Bret. I love Bret, and like I said, there's not a list. I mean, I could put Bret on a list of the top 2020s wrestlers, and he hasn't wrestled in a decade, and he would still probably be, once again, probably one of the most influential moments of the 90s, and this is the third time I've mentioned it, is the curtain call. And the reason being is because Vince was so pissed at the end of that. He had to punish somebody. Hall and Nash obviously went to WCW, like I already mentioned, and Shawn Michaels was the champion at the time, so they weren't going to punish him, so they punished Triple H. Triple H was supposed to win King of the Ring that year, and they took it away from him. Instead, they gave it to Stone Cold Steve Austin. Well, at the time, Steve Austin. And he ends up in the final against Jake the Snake Roberts. He cuts probably, once again, one of the most famous promos in the history of wrestling. The one where he uttered the phrase, Austin 316 says, I just whipped your ass, and finishes it with, and that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so. They knew that was a hit because literally the next night in the arena were nothing but Austin 316 signs. Couple that with a feud with Bret Hart, culminating in the most amazing double turn at WrestleMania 13 you've ever seen, where Bret put him over in a way nobody else could have. And the legend of probably the biggest name in wrestling in the 90s and one of the biggest names ever was born. And I can't think of anyone else who embodied the 90s and the Attitude Era more than him. He carried the WWF on his back. He basically was one of the two catalysts alongside The Rock that retook the lead in the Monday Night Wars from WCW. And to this day, whenever that glass breaks, you hear a pop in an arena that probably, I mean, like, you always said Hogan was the loudest you've ever heard, John. I've seen Austin live tons of times, and I don't think there's ever been a time where that glass didn't break, that the roof didn't come off the place. And it'll still happen to this day. Now, I'm going to couple that with saying that one of the other greatest characters of the 90s was his foil in Mr. McMahon. Austin wouldn't have been what he was without Vince. And having him to play off of, having that evil corporate boss to play off of, it was the hottest thing for years. Austin transcended wrestling. He was one of those guys that, like, even people who didn't watch wrestling knew who Steve Austin was. They were wearing Austin shirts. Austin shirts still, I think, are like top 5 in WWE sales for t-shirts to this day. I don't think you can make a 90s list without him being near the top or at the top. And it's got to be Austin, for me at least.
He also starred in the blockbuster Hollywood action thriller The Condemned, if you remember that.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
All right, so Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like Hulk Hogan in the 80s. How do you know what I mean? I couldn't realistically put a list together of the 90s without him being on it.
All right. Everybody out there that's commenting and watching along, if you want to comment with who your favorite was, I'll read that off. Just give us your one favorite from the 90s. Austin also makes the top 5 wife beaters list. Lou.
Once again, what am I supposed to do? There's not a lot of saints in professional wrestling.
That's fair. That's totally fair. All right. Shauni Mack, serious as a heart attack. Number 1, Sean. Oh, by the way, Sean, I tell the story real quick because Lou mentioned him a second ago. About a month and a half ago at the awesome CT Horror Fest, who did you get to like hang out with all day long until he left?
So I was the servant, I guess, for Mr. Jake the Snake Roberts.
Oh, that's awesome.
Bought himself a cheap bottle of Thunderbird and scrounged up some of that courage he had in his prime, like Austin said.
And you said he bailed a little bit early, right?
Oh, yeah. I don't want to start it. It's funny because, yeah, he wasn't in great shape. We had a wheelchair for him, which he didn't use a lot, but, you know, he would hobble. He was hobbling around. He would get up on his own. He would have people come around to take pictures with him. He would have oxygen in his nose. He did have a tank. And for most of the time, he had the oxygen in his nose. When people would take pictures, he would take the oxygen out. Best part, though, he would get up on his own and go out and have smoke breaks.
So I take it he
back to
stopped doing the DDP yoga?
Yeah. Honestly, so again, I don't want to start anything because apparently someone was there who went running to the Wrestling Observer and Dave Meltzer and said Jake Roberts was on his last legs and can't function. He's on oxygen. He can't walk. Because that was all in the dirt sheets like a couple days after Horror Fest. But I will say the dude just had foot surgery. So that would explain why he's kind of hobbling around, and we did need a wheelchair for him. It's not just I can't imagine many people have had a harder life than this dude, and harder as in as many drugs and who knows what else.
Yeah.
Over the course of 5 decades.
Growing up the way he did, that was
I brought it up.
Yeah.
I brought it up more along the lines of the fact that you got to hang out with like a hero of yours for the day, you know?
Yeah, well, that's old hat at this point. Hang out with Foley all day, George Romero,
I'm Shauni Mack, kids.
Big shot.
Cliff Matthews. By the way, Cliff, I noticed something interesting about your name is that you don't have the second F in Cliff or the second T in Matthews. But that's just interesting. Steve Austin spit his gum out near me back when he was stunning Steve. And I picked it up, and my mom made me throw it back. I could have been a millionaire. All right.
Could have been.
Good. Yeah, that fruit stripe. You should have kept that fruit stripe. And
that had Austin DNA on it.
All right, Sean, who's number one? And I'm going to let all you guys know at this point, the three of you left, is that it can't be Owen Hart. All right? It can't be Owen Hart.
Yeah, it's mathematically it can't be. So, again, Attitude Era. Vince is getting his ass kicked. Everyone's defecting. What did Vince have to do? He had to create his own stars. He had Austin and Triple H, yeah, but they technically came from WCW first. This guy, my number one, Mr. Dwayne Johnson, Rocky Maivia, was truly a guy that Vince created. He's from the wrestling royalty, the Samoan family. They trained him. They brought him up. They went through a million horrible gimmicks to the point where I believe he almost didn't even bother trying what they're trying to say. They settled on The Rock with a horrible, the trunks and like the Double J Jeff Jarrett thing on.
Are you telling me, though, that you don't think the greatest movie actor in modern Hollywood could be Flex Cavana?
Yeah, he could pull off anything at this point, sure. But so, yeah, like Stu, I think you said before, the Rocky die thing. They tried everything to get this guy. This was the Roman Reigns, who he's ironically Roman Reigns' uncle. The Roman Reigns of the 90s. All right, just shoving him down the audience's throat. They weren't having it. Die, Rocky, die. The dude gets injured, comes back, joins the Nation of Domination, and then they give him a mic. And they're like, hey, this guy could freaking talk. Look at him go. Now, you could tell he was a little off. His cadence was a bit off at first. But damn it, that voice and referring to himself in a third person, he had it down. And it was obvious that this dude was going to be a star. He broke away from the group. The rest is history. The feuds with everybody who was anybody in the 90s. Austin, Triple H, Undertaker, Big Show, except Shawn Michaels. Sure, Shawn Michaels, he had still lost his smile.
He was finding Jesus
5 years.
he was finding Jesus a few years after everyone.
Yeah, he was settling into that new gimmick, finding Jesus. But again, The Rock, like, damn it, if you were in a program with The Rock, if you were already a made guy, you were a made guy. Like that. That's how good he was. And this again was a dude who started out with a horrible gimmick and really made the best of it. Was a homegrown star, helped turn the tide of the war towards WWF. Certainly one of the most influential wrestlers of all time and one of the most influential actors. Parlayed that into a ridiculous Hollywood career. And I will say he debuted at Survivor Series 96, which was at MSG. I was at Raw the next night, the New Haven Coliseum. And back then, that's when they would shoot Raw. They were live for an hour. Then they would shoot the next 3 weeks worth of Raw matches. So you're basically getting a month in one night. That dude, I can't tell you how many times he would come out and mess up his promo, ironically enough, where there was a thing with Billy Gunn, a program Billy Gunn, where he was getting in his face, and they had to reshoot that 2 other times during the night because he kept forgetting his lines or just screwing up. It was hysterical. They would come out and do the same thing, and everyone's like, why are they doing this again? Oh, because he keeps messing it up, right? So to see where he went from that to, God damn it, the best talker on the mic possibly ever, definitely top 3, it's incredible. So number 1, The Rock.
The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock. These are names I know. I know Sal is going to screw that up, I think, because Sal likes his wrestling. He likes his wrestling vague and low key.
I don't know what you're talking about. No, low key is not on my list. Maybe in 2000s. Okay, well, you will know this name because Lou already mentioned him. It's Mick Foley, Cactus Jack, Mankind, Dude Love. I feel like, as Lou already said, you can't talk about the 90s without talking about Mick Foley. Just between being in WCW, ECW, WWF, he covered all the gamut there, and the Hell in the Cell, legendary. Everyone knows that. He was impossible not to root for after that. He, is whether, it's a good thing or not, sort of brought hardcore matches to the masses in WWF. It definitely took its toll on him, but in Hell in the Cell matches, all that stuff, while other people had him, he kind of, now everyone knows about that giant cage because of him. And he's just, he between his promos, his matches, he almost, transcended like a lot of these other guys. And it's just impossible not to love the guy in the 90s.
Do you have what gimmick is your favorite?
It's tough to choose because it's like, he's almost become just Mick Foley, the guy who these other things, I remember when he came in as Mankind, and it was for WWF, it was like an original thing at the time, almost like a throwback to kind of like the old Undertaker type gimmick coming in. So that's probably, I would say his WWF stuff is probably what you'd have to choose, but he was also legendary in ECW and, even with Japan and his Cactus Jack stuff. I mean, ECW, every commercial was Cactus Jack, just so it was impossible to avoid him no matter what company you were watching at that time.
All right. So those are all 3 names I know. We're talking some big people here. See? Eric says we need a special mention for Val Venus, the big Val Balski. Stu, did you finally? Now we've been on for an hour and 20 seconds.
Trust me, I 100%. When you said top 90s wrestlers, number 1 was never in question. It was just the rest of the list I had to work on. So my number 1 was set from the second you say 1990s wrestlers. And so far, we've had Stone Cold Steve Austin. We've had The Rock. We've had Mick Foley. 3 names that always come to mind right after you think of my number 1 wrestler from the 90s, Ernest the Cat Miller. And motherfuck you if you laugh at Ernest the Cat Miller, because he was amazing. And for a solid year, he was the only reason I watched wrestling.
Wait, so is the actual answer?
I am not being facetious. My actual answer is Ernest the Cat Miller because he was great. Wrestling is supposed to be fun.
Do you know that name, John?
I do not. But I will say this: I don't know Ernest the Cat Miller, but I do know Stu, and I know that Stu's favorite comic book character is Jubilee. If you don't know who Jubilee is, it's okay. Most people don't. She's the little Asian X-Men girl in the yellow raincoat.
Everyone knows who Jubilee is. She was on the cartoon.
Her power is she's the 4th of July. That's who Jubilee is. So this does not surprise me.
No, Ernest the Cat Miller came in. He was an actual martial artist. He was an award-winning black belt, whatever martial artist. And WCW just brought him in because I think he was friends with Eric Bischoff. They were like, whatever, come in, do what you do. He came in, he was nothing. He was just a guy, he threw some kicks, he was worthless. But then they turned him heel, and it was like The Rock. And I don't mean to say Ernest the Cat Miller is just like The Rock, but Ernest the Cat Miller is just like The Rock.
Now, were you planning on wearing like a tiger print jacket for this, or did you not want to give it away?
I didn't get out my red dancing shoes. So he came up and he became a heel, and he became hilarious. He started coming up with, because it was in the era where Ty Bo was a thing, he came out with Cat Bo, and every single match before he'd start the match, he'd climb up on the turnbuckles and he'd start yelling at the fans, "Looks like you need Cat Bo, fat boy." And somebody call my mama, I'm about to whoop on somebody. And they did this gimmick where he was friends with James Brown, and for months he would talk about James Brown's going to come to my matches. James Brown's going to come to my matches. And then one pay-per-view, they didn't even advertise that it was going to happen. James Brown fucking came to his match, and they danced together, and it was great.
Well, from all I'm glad I left you last
as well. Future movie star as well.
Star.
He was in the wrestler. The wrestler. I played the bad guy. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, interesting. I'm glad I left you for last, Stu, because
no, 100%. When you said top 90s wrestlers, Ernest the Cat Miller instantly was my number one. I loved him. In 1999, I was entering my phase where I was like, I'm kind of done with wrestling. His antics on WCW kept me watching wrestling longer than I would have otherwise.
Wow. And did he and was he someone that went past this, or like was the 90s the end for him?
That was pretty much the end. He did have he came into WWF, and I think it was actually the 2004 Rumble we talked about earlier. They did a spot where Benoit and Randy Orton were down. They were the only two people in the ring. They were both down and injured. And Ernest the Cat Miller comes out, and he just comes out, he gets in the ring, he sees them both on the ground, and he just dances until they have time to get up and throw him out.
Cliff says, I've always been a work rate fan. Man, like literally 2 hours ago, I'd never heard these two words put together before. And we've had a complete course. I feel like I could do a dissertation on work rate now. But Buddy says Ernest Miller was, and in all caps, incredibly entertaining.
So much fun. He was so
entertaining, but top wrestler of the 90s. Oh boy.
He brought me the most joy in the 90s.
And I guess at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
If you could make every wrestler in the 90s enter a Royal Rumble, which one guy in that match would I be cheering to win? Ernest the Cat Miller.
It amazes me that you're not watching NXT 2.0, but you love Ernest the Cat Miller, because that's like literally what Vince wants now.
Well, Vince should sign him up. I'm sure Ernest can still do it. He can come out and call people fat boy.
Probably use the paycheck too.
Our good buddy Eric says, I am at once so happy and super depressed for Stu. I guess let me tell you something. I love all you guys, by the way. I want to give Stu the spotlight for a second, because Stu, we've been friends for a couple years now.
Who I like. I am not dishonest about who I like.
Listen, there's nobody that we have on the show, guest wise or co-host wise, that I get more people going, what's up with Stu? Like, and I'll have people literally text me and go, hey, I listened to your show the other day, and what's up with Stu? I'm like, is he being serious, or is that his real? And I'm like, look, I've met him once. we're very friendly, and I think that he's just a very earnest guy. But like nobody else, nobody ever says, why did Sir John think that, or what was Lou thinking about that, or why did Lloyd say that? I don't get any of that. But anytime Stu's on, I get fuck Stu and Stu's opinions. What's wrong with Stu? Why did Stu think that? So this just goes along with it.
Nobody can say Ernest Miller didn't bring them joy in late 90s WCW, man.
And my wife Lindsay says we love Stu, and everybody loves Stu. I love the fact that you're our buddy Carlos from the Insufferable Bastards is always just like, I tried listening to Pine of Comics and he had Stu on again, and I just don't understand a thing that guy is saying. I don't understand anything.
At least it wasn't Disco Inferno, is all I gotta say.
Oof. You talk about entertaining though. Disco was it.
I don't know if you can see, he's on the list.
The Eliminators.
And also,
Oh my!
yes, the
Whoa!
Eliminators. And also,
Where were they?
and also, if you're talking '90s WCW guys that brought me joy,
What does it say?
Stevie
Norman
Richards?
Smiley.
Norman Smiley.
Norman Smiley.
Yeah.
All right, without getting too
I'm
deep,
sensing a dancing theme here.
Yeah.
Stevie Richards. Come on.
Guys, the dance are awesome. If I was a wrestler, I would just dance and lose all my matches because dancing is better.
John Amato, good friend, says Steve Corino had a great run in ECW at the end of the 90s as the king of the old school.
Yeah, he
bull rope match versus Dusty Rhodes and Danbury.
and carried over into the 2000s. He had some great matches in Ring of Honor as well.
All right, without getting too in depth with time going on, I will go around. Stu just said a couple of them. Lou, do you have any honorable mentions? And please, for the sake of everything, say Owen Hart.
I mean, honest to God, Owen Hart and Sabu both went on and off my list probably more than anyone. So I'm gonna go Owen Hart and Sabu.
All right, before I get to Sean real quick, I do want to finish John's list off. And it's funny, I saw this as I was reading. John from Shocking Things, number one, is, and he wrote it the same way. So, the homicidal, suicidal, genocidal, death-defying maniac Sabu. Sabu is the number one because he created many of the things that brought the stale state of wrestling back to life in the 90s. He innovated the use of tables, chairs, barbed wire in wrestling. The style became popular first in ECW and then WWF and WCW in the US.
And turning out the lights.
All right, so Shauni Mack, Horror News Network. Who would you give a couple shout outs to?
So I didn't actually write down any honorable mentions, but I definitely had some in the back of my head. Public Enemy was a tag team that I considered because it would seem like such a stupid freaking gimmick. But again, beginning at ECW, they're putting people through tables, they're putting people through two tables, they're putting people through flaming, tables on fire. Their feud with the Gangstas was incredible early on in ECW. Again, they left kind of early. They went to WCW and kind of became a joke. Then they went to WWF and really became a joke. But again, they brought me a lot of joy. I even had a Public Enemy shirt. Those weren't very hard to come by at the time. So they were an honorable mention. Bret was briefly on my list. I really tried hard to think of somebody from WCW. Jericho was like the closest I really could come to really saying, one of my favorite of the 90s, sure. Beyond that, Fake Razor, Fake Diesel. TL Hopper. He was another. No, it really, like, I had my list. These are the guys I enjoyed. Maybe not the most influential wrestlers, but these are the ones that brought me the most joy in the 90s.
All right. Sal, do you want to give a couple out?
All about joy.
Do you want to give a couple out? Do you want to give out names that nobody here will know, even these guys, because you saw them once at New Britain?
I'm not the guy saying Ernest Miller. Come on.
Sal saw this guy one time in an abandoned hospital in the basement wrestling in New Britain, Connecticut. So this is who he's going to talk about right now.
No, because the thing is, all the guys I saw in independent wrestling shows are now like the biggest guys in fucking WWE. So yeah, they're none of the guys are obscure. So I don't know where you even get that from. It's just the difference is I was seeing them when they were in a hall with only like 300 people.
All right, then who would you straight up give?
For the 90s, I mean, there's a lot of ECW guys. Sabu was definitely one of them. RVD, Jerry Lynn was the one, but he was kind of like towards the end. I tried to really have guys who had like, long careers in the 90s. Vader was another one who, tons of potential, a monster, but also kind of went to WWF and had, his balls cut off of him essentially. Let's see, who else? Eddie Guerrero, another guy who probably will come up in another list if we keep going in time. Rey Mysterio. There's a lot of good guys who had good matches, but either where they were in WCW, in WWF, that they maybe didn't reach their full potential till a later time.
Okay, all right, fair. So here's the last question for you guys. What do you want to do next? Do you want to do 2000s through 2010? Do you want to do 2000s up till now period? Do you want to do something different, like top 5 might be long, top 3 favorite WrestleMania matches? What? I'm going to leave it up to you guys. You guys don't have to answer now. You can confer with each other, however you want to do it. But we'll do something along those lines. Chat amongst yourselves, and that'll be the next one we do. I think anything we do with this group here will be fun. Let's go around real quick again. There you go. Yeah, you 4 guys in a cage, and whoever's left alive.
I'm just gonna dance.
All right, so let's go around again. Stu, SWO Productions, give them the pitch.
SWO Productions is the website, swoproductions.com. We have new articles every day. Cliff, who's been in the comments, has done some wrestling stuff with me over there. We do some stuff where we rate wrestlers. I haven't had one of those in a while. We'll have to do another one. The Twitter at SWO Productions, I pretty much talk nonsense all the time. And I have the Stu World Order podcast, comes out on the 1st and the 15th of every month, although that might be changing come April. We might be increasing the production on that. But for right now, 1st and 15th of every month, we talk random comic book movies. Current episode is Superman 2, which I covered with Julio from the Contrarians.
Very good. I say it all the time to you, but if you're not listening to Stu's podcast, you're missing out. It's a real treat every 2 weeks. And I'll be on the first episode of 2022.
2022. So, and then I'll just give it away now. In April, we're actually canceling the show and just becoming an Ernest the Cat Miller podcast.
Yes. Well, I will be hitting my unsubscribe button very quickly. No offense, Lou. Now Lou is part of the pint, but Lou's a big video game guy. Any big? What's the game you're playing right now, Lou? What are you immersed in?
What am I immersed in right now?
Yeah.
Let's see. Halo just launched their multiplayer, so I've been playing that. Forza Horizon 5 came out, so I've been playing that. Outriders just launched a new update, so I've been playing that.
Jesus Christ.
I've been bouncing back and forth. But I am going to take my time.
Yep.
And I am going to pimp Ocho Duro Parlay Hour. Great guys to talk wrestling with on Monday nights. I am also going to shout out 3 Fat Nerds Pod and 607 TWS. They are great to talk wrestling with, along with Stu on basically Mondays, Wednesdays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Sundays when there's anything going on. Great people. And our mutual buddy Mike, he's a streamer. Blind Taco Bear on Twitch.
Yes.
Sub to him. That's my time. I used it.
All right. That's fair.
I shouted out others.
Shauni Mack, tell him where to find your writing.
Lou found Jesus this segment.
I found
he
Jesus.
was selfless.
I gave to others.
So check out Horror News Network, horrornewsnetwork.net, your one-stop shop for all horror news, reviews, interviews, everything. Also check out CT Cult Classics, Connecticut Cult Classics. There we go, ConnecticutCultClassics.com, as well as CT Horror Fest. Connecticut Horror Fest coming back next September for 2 days. It's finally expanding to 2 days. That'll be next September. Connecticut Horror Fest. I want to shout out my boy AC. He's got a wrestling podcast, Retromania. You can find that on any podcast app. Wherever you get your podcast, Retromania.
All right.
And hopefully I won't break my toes 3 days before CT Horror Fest this year, so I can go.
Yeah, 2 days. Start wearing steel toe boots. All right, Sal, give it to him. Tell him what you do over there at the RBI.
Yeah, rubberbaronsinc.com. We are original design T-shirts, all hand-printed stuff, getting ready for the holidays, pop culture T-shirts, food-related, a whole variety of types of things. Get your holiday shopping in, and you can always save with a promo code PINTO on our rubberbaronsinc.com, and we'll just keep doing our things, doing holiday fairs, but follow us on Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff, Rubber Barons Inc.
Always. Are you sure the code shouldn't be the cat?
Yeah.
Well, do you have any Ernest the Cat Miller t-shirts?
That'll be for us Stu World Order.
I just want a shirt with Ernest on that says, "Look like you need cat bow, fat boy."
2022, when we have our talk about the filming of The Wrestler and Ernest the Cat Miller, we can talk about that.
If you've ever seen the Pint of Comics shirt with the pint and then the comic book, that is a Robert Barron's design. Is awesome. And thank you so much again, Sal, for doing that for us. let's see here. John from Shocking Things, whose list I read off, he does a podcast. I've been listening to it lately. Very good. Quick bites, kind of like Stu's show, 45 minutes or so. They talk movies. They talk like kind of horror centric and cult centric stuff. They're doing the Ninja November, as I said earlier. But you know what? I can't not pimp us as well. Check out the latest pint. This week's episode, actually last week's episode that's still running into this week, where Joe, Professor Joe, and myself talked about Dune, the brand new Dune, 2021. And tomorrow night, Saturday night, I'll be putting out the latest episode. It's the one of the last Pint Movie Invitationals. Me and Brent from Home Video Hustle, which is a great podcast you should check out. He picked Punisher Warzone, and we talk about that. We talk about that one, which I'm not gonna lie, I'm a fan, and it was fun to talk about because it's just a violent, nasty little gory movie. So check that out. Cult Classics has a show next week, November 27th. Please, here we go. Top tag teams of all time. Maybe John, maybe we will do that. I accept that. I accept that. And thank you, Eric. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you guys go to the show next week, see you there. And don't forget, John is on the John Marini was on the stream here tomorrow night, the 20th, at the Strand. Don't forget, tickets are still on sale. 1987's Masters of the Universe, starring Dolph Lundgren, and 1990s live action. Don't tell Lloyd. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Lloyd is he's a little high stress sometimes. I don't need him like having a heart attack because we talked about that too many times. So go check that out. Go to Sci-Fi at the Strand on Facebook and get your tickets. It's a Saturday night. Go check it out. Guys, thank you so much for being on. This was fun. And as always, see ya.